will get started.
Yeah.
So, welcome to The Future is Now, a virtual communique which is brought to you by Cooperation Humboldt and the Imaginal Services Bureau, which is a project of Cooperation Humboldt. My name is Cedar.
I'm Sequoia.
And we have tonight with us, the guest is Lonny, who is one of the people that we are coming back through time to interview in order to help us understand about what's going on in the year 2020, as Sequoia and I are from the year 2688, which is 668 years in the future. And somehow with our assistant Rufus, who is based in the year 2020, has somehow connected us through these technical things in order to have a conversations with folks from the year 2020. And we're looking particularly for what types of people. Sequoia, why don't you explain what our research is about?
Well, as historians, we're really looking for what led us to the place where we are. This glorious world that you see behind me, here in 2688, where all of our needs are met, nobody's exploited, nobody's oppressed. We actually had to learn what that word was through our research. And really, we're looking for the people who did the hard work that brought us to this wonderful place. And through our wonderful friend Rufus, who we somehow met through all of these tubes that you call the internets, has brought us to, he introduced us to a webpage, which had a lot of predictions for the future, this Imaginal Services Bureau. And we realized that something special was happening in the year 2020, that there were a lot of people doing the work that brought us to this wonderful world. And he found us Lonny.
Thanks, Lucas.
Lonny, so our understanding is Lonny works in the world of in understanding appropriate technology. So I guess in our time, all technology is appropriate. So maybe you could explain what kind of work you do, Lonny, to bring about the glorious utopia of 2688.
What year are you from again? Tell me this.
Well,
2688, as you would call it. We don't call it then. What do we call it?
Here and now.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel a little naked without my face line, but I need 600 years to catch up. I really, really like it. And I love your starting question about what appropriate technology is. It would make sense to me, and it would be my only hope that the name would just seem so anachronistic to you and redundant. Like saying, we have a lot of fun redundant acronyms in this era, like PIN number, like personal identification number. And that's really like appropriate technology. They're, the name I secretly use for it is inevitable technology, because it's either the technology we're going to have or we're all going to be dead.
Well, we're here to let you know we're here 668 years later. So yes, inevitable technology maybe would be a better word. Thank you.
We have a few of those. There's also social entrepreneurship, but in your area, you probably just call it making cool shit. If I'm getting to know you all. But here we had to add the word social to say that you're paying attention to the social and political context and the people being impacted. But why would you do anything else?
And I guess I'm still kind of stuck on the idea. So if you're working on appropriate technology, that means that there's inappropriate technology.
Right. It's an interesting and nuanced question. And of course, what I really want to be doing is asking you, like, what are all the technologies that still exist? But I understand breaking some type of time. I've seen some sci-fi movies.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So don't give me any, if you want to just wink twice though, if I nail something, that would be fantastic. So a lot in this current time, a lot of technology is for technology's sake. We have this really exciting break things fast and fail often kind of mentality that makes for a lot of great creativity, but unfortunately it ignores the fact that justice and community are necessary for our survival. right? And so we end up making these things that don't promote a just distribution. So we end up with inequalities of wealth and power and all types of other things. And so appropriate technology tries to flip that script by saying that you can't just make a technology without examining the political and social and environmental context. But for me, and a lot of the people I work with, we take it a step further, and that's that a technology needs to be made with the people that are going to be using it. Which is, I think you couldn't have picked a better time than 2020 to come to. And I don't know if you had picked this moment or if you just ended up in 2020, but wow. The stuff that the nonprofit I'm the president of has been working on 14 years, the stuff that I've been working on for 31 years, and the stuff that the people that I've looked up to have been working on for 60 years, and the stuff of the people that I was reading have been working on for 200 years. A lot of it has come to fruition like right at this moment. Some poet, I think Hafiz, has a poem that says something like, "My roof in ruins, I drown in light." And I always love that poem. And 2020 feels a lot like that, but more like our world in flames, our path illuminated.
Wow.
So I feel like you came to an exciting time.
Well, like we said, I think there were some technological things. People started communicating using their screens a lot for some reason at this time period. But also it's this Imaginal Services Bureau where the folks who created that were saying that you have to imagine how the world can be a better place before you can actually make it a better place. And so that's what we're looking for, those people who are doing that imagining. And apparently that's some of your work. We've heard you've been, for some reason, I thought you were a hunter at first because you have a series of books. Maybe I don't know how far you've gotten at this point, but we know there's Catch the Rain, Catch the Sun, but I won't give anything away.
I appreciate it. I'm glad to know that the 15 books in that 5 trilogy series did come out by your time. At this pace, probably the last book just came out in
there we go.
2688. Yeah, probably just hit. These books are they're about distributed resources and communities taking ownership of the resources. Right? The idea is that something we notice, one of the reasons that people are communicating via screen right now is we had a new pandemic called COVID-19. And as part of that, people really started to notice that these elegant, efficient distribution streams that capitalism made were very vulnerable. And it's not that people hadn't been saying that for years. It's not like there wasn't plenty of people saying, "Oh my God, these systems are not robust and they're not resilient. If there's any perturbance, there's going to be a big issue." Actually, we have a technology called mics in this era that I'm going to put on. Maybe you can hear me a little better now. So there's this other system, this other way of doing things, more like nature, where you have distributed systems. One of the ways that I've been tackling these issues, and keep in mind that the way that the issues of today need to be attacked are myriad. I mean, there's so many different ways that need to be wrestled with and grappled with and deeply grokked. I personally picked mine only based upon what it is I could do for my entire life. And so what it is I can do for my entire life is work with communities that are building their own resources. And the idea being is that the more a community can take care of its own needs, the more resilient it is to emergencies and disaster, but also the more power they have to share with their neighbor and to actually provide just distribution. Because these invisible systems we have make it so we have just grand inequities. So the first book was To Catch the Rain. Here's this amazing natural resource. And it was about how various communities around the world came together to catch their own rainwater and share it with their community, with their schools, with their household. And it also includes the math and science if you want to do it. And then finally, it just has the how-to. So we look at how to do it with materials that you could find anywhere in this era. Right? So bamboo, metal, wood, PVC. This new book is To Catch the Sun. And it's about how to do that with solar energy. and I have, don't give me any hints, right? But I have no idea if photovoltaic power makes any sense in 2688. The only thing that I'm sure of, and you don't have to tell me if I'm right or wrong, but the only thing I'm sure of, the only technology that we need to hold on to is community, and how we work together, and how we make decisions together, and how we take care of each other. But for now, I'm focusing on these resources that we can leverage: the water, the sun for energy. We'll look at construction. We'll look at waste. We'll look at how people work together. Does that answer your question?
Excellent. You bring up an important part of when we've done our research that I've discovered is concept of waste, which is very foreign to us.
Yeah.
So maybe you could explain what that's all about in the year 2020, because it kind of is confusing to us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what an amazing time to be talking about waste. I think if your next interview, you might want to go back to 1920. So 100 years ago was another really interesting time to ask that question. Right?
We'll have to figure out the right technology to get us back to 1920.
There is no Zoom in 1920.
Yeah.
It might be a radio program, I think, or something.
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay. Well, so for 2020, it's a really interesting question, right? Like there is no such thing as waste. There's just bad design and you know, lack of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you've seen this year more than any other year in the US is people really starting to notice how much waste they have. And also, once resources were running low, people started thinking, okay, well, how can I use the resources I have and eke them out a little bit longer? You know, nature doesn't have waste, right? Like it has outputs that are the inputs for another process. And we're just at the beginning of stages at understanding that, right? It's not just conservation. It's not just using less, right? It's also savoring our resources and using them more beautifully, more connected, and more wisely, so that our consumption maybe it isn't even just right now. 2020 is still very focused on environmentalism and conservation in the US. And really, I'm guessing that by your time, we're way past that, right? We're not looking at how can humans have less of a negative footprint. We're looking at how humans can have a more positive handprint, right? So regenerative design. So how could our consumption actually regenerate the environment? We're just at the edge of that. Ooh, thank you.
You know, it seems to me from some of the other conversations that we've had with your contemporaries in 2020 that a common theme that is running through a lot of the problems that are coming to light is kind of a competition, but also a desire to have more than others. And I wonder how much that contributes to waste. You know, and I, again, don't want to give too much away, but like, you know, you said it yourself that in nature, the outputs of one thing are the inputs of another, right? And that there is, but also when we share with others, there's less that's left at the end that needs to be dealt with as a waste product.
Yeah, you know, we're definitely in a system that promotes fear and scarcity, which then promotes hoarding. You saw very much in 2020 that changing in a lot of communities where right away, you know, here in Humboldt, right away, we had people trying to figure out how they can contribute to their neighbors. It was beautiful to watch. I saw people being activated that maybe had thought about being involved before, but they were able to say, you know what, I'm not going to live in fear. I am going to take action. And some of these systems were multi-connected and let me just give you an example instead of trying to describe it. So we had local 3D printers printing out little gadgets that made it easier for sewers to make bias tape so that they can make face masks because our frontline workers didn't have them because our distribution systems weren't resilient and effective and just. Right? And you saw that all over. You saw people delivering food to their neighbors, delivering medical supplies to the neighbors, making hand sanitizer. And that came from realizing that abundance comes from sharing, right? And the more healthy your neighborhood is, and the more healthy your community is, and the more healthy your world is, the more healthy you are. And it's carried over to some of the new movements where we're starting to finally focus on the people that have been the most impacted by systemic isms, right? And I think that the world is realizing that if we keep raising up the people that are under the most systemic oppression, it ends up adding value to all of our lives, right? And I think that because of all the different things that happened, everyone's gotten to get a taste of what that's like, of what some fear, right? Some suffering, but also some community engagement. And I don't mean to, I don't mind. So I don't know if people in this era will be watching this, but I don't mean to make any silver lining out of all of the pain and devastation and fires that are now. But I hope that in 600 years, that pain has passed, and what was reborn in its place makes it so these things will never have to happen again.
Did you get that signal?
I did, thank you. I was trying to pretend I didn't in case there's like some time police that will show up and say,
we might not even see the ripple. So that was very, very flippant of me. I apologize.
That brings up an interesting thing. Word you used there, police, which I'm glad to say we don't have that. It's an interesting concept. It's strange. This short-lived idea that occurred in your time period. I mean, and my understanding, it's kind of coming to an end in your time.
I'm glad to hear that.
I'm sorry. I need to stop telling them these things.
We're getting too comfortable here, Cedar. Too comfortable.
We knew. Don't worry. Like we know. But also, I think my first rally on these issues was 31 years ago. And it felt like very little moved in the last 30 years on those issues. And now you really feel it. It reached, on so many things, we've reached a tipping point. We've reached this historical point where finally people just have to notice what's going on. And to realize that, these systems served a purpose and they got us a certain distance. And a lot of them did it well for some amount of time, but they're antiquated, and the pain of getting rid of that old skin it's hard for people.
And that is one thing that I feel I can say without putting in too much detail. But in our research throughout the ages, that it is hard to get rid of those systems, but it does happen, and it's worth it. When you can shed those things and move on to the next.
Well, I'm glad to hear that still rings true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that really rings true and is resonating with me is the idea of community as a technology. Right? And that is a system where different pieces work together to produce a different output.
Right. That's the hardest one. Right. We have enough resources. A lot of my friends see the world as doomed, and we have too many people, and they need to stop having children. And you're the ones who need to be having children, right? You're going to install this stewardship in your young. We have enough resources to go around. We just don't distribute them justly. And part of that is because of embedded systems of inequity. And part of it is just because we're hard to work with, right? I bet, you're only 600 years in the future. I bet you have all types of wonderful stuff, but working together is probably still a pain in the butt. We're different, unique individuals, and trying to come to consensus or build stuff together and to communicate when we have different views, and to be able to empathize and see each other's views with different educational backgrounds and different sources of privilege. In this era, we're just starting to peel apart what ableism is versus racism versus classism and how sexism and how these things play together, let alone just a simple communication, just like a sentence and what that can mean. It is the technology that I'm the most interested in. It is the last series of the books that I want to write. And in part, I'm waiting that long because I want a lot more wisdom before I tried to write those. In Humboldt County, I work with, which is where I'm calling from 2020, or I'm on this Zoom from 2020 in Humboldt County in California. Those political lines might not mean anything to you, but there's a bioregion here you probably have a name for, right? Mm-hmm. And we've worked with hundreds of teams to build stuff all around this community. We've worked around the world building over 1,000 projects. And the easiest thing in almost all of them was electricity, water, plumbing, construction. The hardest thing was, how do we communicate? How do we make decisions? How do we show compassion?
Mm-hmm. Well, we spend a lot of time talking.
Let me tell you this. I know one person who's very difficult to work with, and I'm not ashamed to say it's me.
Oh,
but we have some awareness here in the future. You know, we're not ashamed. We know our limitations. So.
And it's helpful, you know, and I did not realize this until we really dug into our research, but it is incredibly helpful that we don't have to go to a place and trade our labor for money for a large chunk of our lives. Mm-hmm. You know, that does free up a lot of time for working towards consensus, for sitting in that circle and talking it out.
Yeah, I can imagine just being able to sleep each night probably makes you a slightly nicer person to deal with, right? We're in an era right now where most people are pushed past their capabilities as a human to really find peace and find rest and find regeneration just for their own body. They're too busy trying to stay alive. But really, we have all the resources to thrive. I'm glad that you're all at that point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm receiving message from Rufus that we're coming toward the end, and we want to make sure you have enough time to give us a really great vision of how you would see the future playing out, you know, in the next 668 years. And we can maybe, like we said, not exactly tell you that it's all working, but we want to hear how do you see things going from where you're at to get to this glorious utopia that we live in now?
I really love that question, and you're not the first visitors from the future to ask me that question. But no one's ever really liked my answer.
Uh-oh.
I have no idea. I don't want to know. I don't even like want to visualize it too much, except for I want it to be made by the people who are living it. I mean, I have all types of ideas. I am, you know, like this, like probably a hippie. I don't know, you know, futurist, egalitarian, like all those words, right? I have a vision for food that makes us feel healthier, why it regenerates the environment, for energy systems that provide for our needs that we really, really appreciate, while at the same time fueling our ecosystem. And water that's so clean and runs so pure that it regenerates your cells when you drink it, and construction that provides habitat for humans and all types of other life and ways of communicating. But the way it actually looks, I really I want to emphasize that my vision should be should have a value of 1 in maybe 7.8 billion. Right? And that future should be made by all the people who are going to be living it. And I also know that it's going to have things that I didn't like and things that did make me uncomfortable. Because if I'm totally comfortable in the future, it's probably one that was designed just by me.
Yeah.
And I think that we had to have this conversation a lot with Rufus when we first met him, because he would always point out, and he questioned our happiness here in the future, because we describe it as a utopia. And he says that sounds pretty boring. But I think that he's misunderstanding what we mean by that. You know, it doesn't mean that every day is the sun rises and it's 86 degrees and we have all of our needs met. What it means is that we are able to thrive physically and have meaningful and productive lives. And sometimes that does include sadness, and that does include discomfort. And that is what makes it meaningful.
Let us share this bit about Utopia, which will be helpful maybe for you and your work, is that I think this idea that what people think of when it's just the word that we can use to try to convey this, but it's not, I think the idea that everything would be taken care of for you and that you just have whatever you want without having to do anything, it's a product of your time, of where people have this expectation that they don't have to do anything to make their world be the way they want it to be. They want everything just handed to them. I guess it's this idea of entitlement, of like, I'm entitled to other people serving me. And where the truth comes in of Utopia is we're all serving each other.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who thinks that having your basic needs met is going to make your life easy hasn't had their basic needs met. I've been lucky enough to live in multiple situations where I've had all my needs met and almost none of my needs met. And where my brain goes when all of my needs are met is much harder play. So I look forward to a future where all of our needs are met, so we can struggle on those other things of how we're going to make meaning, how we're going to contribute, how we're going to change ourselves, you know, what it is we even like doing, which I can imagine is a big struggle in the future.
Yeah, it is. And I think because we do have the time and space to struggle over that, it becomes a very interesting conversation.
I am interested, 600 years in the future, my assumption is there's still things that people are fighting for and fighting about. And just hopefully none of those things are about the basic right to life, right? The basic right to resources. Right? But I would be really bored to live in a future where I didn't have another future that I wanted. Right now, if you compare us on a lot of metrics, we have way less child deaths than we've ever had before, way less maternal, labor deaths than we've ever had before, right? But we're nowhere near the final destination. And for you all, and for me, if I'm somehow alive in that time, I hope that you haven't finished those issues.
No, and I will. I feel like we discussed this beforehand, and I'm at liberty to say this. There are a number of things that we've learned about in your time that we don't have here because they've gone extinct for various reasons. Oh. And so that is something that we strive for, is how to, not only protect the things that we love so that they don't become extinct, but how do we get bananas again?
Oh my gosh. You should, if you have a chance to read some old Balkan literature, I suggest it, because there's some pretty funny stories about communism falling and people finally getting to taste a banana.
Yeah.
But we will never know that. Right. But thank you for joining us. And apparently we will meet a week forward in your time to speak to some folks from Centro del Pueblo.
Yes. Fantastic job.
In a few more weeks, maybe hopefully somebody from Black Humboldt. So we've got lots of other folks lined up. Apparently, Rufus is getting us all together. So thank you for joining us, Lonny, and we'll maybe we'll have you on again in another time.
Yeah.
Cedar and Sequoia, I really appreciate meeting you. I'd like to make a quick drop, I think is what we call it in this era, of some Appropedia is the website that I had mentioned. And it's a spot, if you want to see 40,000 technologies that have been implemented around the world, you can check out appropedia.org. And also locally, we're running this competition called the Awesome Business Competition, which is for any groups working on agriculture, water, and energy in Northern California that are trying to make a business out of it. Maybe some of those businesses are still alive in your era, but we're going to have a competition with real prize money, with workshops along the way, final competition in November. Thank you for letting me drop that now.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Appreciate
you,
you both.
Lonny. Yeah.
Toodles.
Much appreciated.
Bye-bye.
And thank you to everybody out there in the interweb that got caught in our interweb.